Hello,
Hi,
everyone. Hi, Rosie.
welcome to Many Minds. Today we're going to talk about something that is really relevant for the moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we are going to continue with IFS. We started last week, and we wanted to continue and kind of expand on the different parts of, um, you know, managers, firefighters, and protectors, and things like that. And we figures that since I am right now in the middle of a natural disaster, we're safe, we're fine. We wanted to kind of just use this moment to see how IFS itself, internal family systems, can actually help in moments like this, or maybe post or pre, as we prepare for natural disasters. So right now, we are waiting for Milton to hit the west coast of Florida, and we have done a lot of preparation for it. And yeah, so Rosie, maybe you can start by giving us a brief idea of how can IFS actually be useful in moments like this.
Yeah. Well, I think one, there's a lot I can talk about in that, right? But I think
Mm-hmm.
even just making it can help us to make sense of like what are the
Mm-hmm.
parts that are coming up for us, and even to like organize
Mm-hmm.
what's kind of happening for us internally, right? So, for example, like there might be a part of you that's really trying to make sure you're on top of being prepared for the disaster. There might be a part of you that's feeling anxious and like wanting to spiral about fears related to it.
Yeah.
And there might be a part that's trying to like keep that part at bay, right? Or calm it. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there might be a part that's, like trying to manage, like how family's showing up around it or something like that, or like set boundaries internally and or externally, right? About how to
Yeah.
handle the situation. And I think even being able to see like, okay, this is what's coming up for me can be really grounding, because then even just mapping out like what is coming up for me can help us get back to a place of feeling centered and grounded in ourselves. And
Yeah. So recognizing, acknowledging all of the different parts, and we can go into different parts in a second, but that we are feeling throughout this time, or throughout different times throughout the day, because
yeah,
morning, afternoon may shift depending on what the news say, how families are responding to you. It actually helps harmonize. So if I can acknowledge that I think one word that I was thinking about was like manager, right? My manager, my part who's managing right now, already put up shutters, or I had people help me if I did not do it by myself. Help me, people, people had put up shutters. So I know my windows and doors are protected. Now I can soothe that anxiety, right? Or
yeah,
soothe myself so that I don't get to a place where I feel anxious, because I'm prepared. I have water, I have food, we're good. So that helps prevent, which other part?
like the
The
part that's
protector.
afraid I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that can be an anxious protector, or it could even be like
Mm-hmm.
an exile that's kind of had painful or scary experiences related to natural disasters.
Actually, true. I didn't even think about that, because I have gone through other natural disasters. So I know I have to have like things ready. So then, yeah, maybe that exile say, hey, remember that time we needed to put up the shutters? So let's get ready
Yeah,
now.
there
Yeah.
might be a little, like an inner childish kind of part that's like wanting to curl up and freak out about it, right? But there's like other
Mm-hmm.
parts that are maybe trying to protect you from feeling all of that emotion, and also trying to protect that little one inside from kind of being in an experience like that again.
Mm-hmm.
Preparing ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
curious, Rosie, if you can help, and I'll just give you a personal example since I'm going through it. So as I prepared for it and I had everything ready, shutters, food, water, pet food, you may hear my pets. I don't know, you may. Everything is like settled. There comes a time where the news can be overwhelming. So you kind of stop the news, and it's good to just sit down, and watch like a kid movie with the kids, for example, what would that part be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that can look different for different people. Some people
Right,
like
just an example.
glue themselves to the screen and want to watch the news, right? And I think having a protector that's like, okay, maybe we don't slip into the anxiety, right? Like maybe we actually
Yes.
just think of something light. And sometimes that can be, like your higher self too. That's just trying to like gently show up for your parts. The distinction, right, is if I'm in self, there's the sense of like compassionate holding of space for other parts. Whereas parts tend to have like a sense of urgency, a sense of agenda, this is what needs to happen, or this is what I'm afraid will happen.
Then that's the part that can be like glued to the TV, like waiting for something, like that catastrophic thinking that can actually come up sometimes when anxiety shows up, and the fear that can actually take over. So not allowing self-compassion, that kind of part of you. Okay. I was curious what IFS would label it.
Yeah. I think, and that's a really good question, right? Because it really depends on the energy of like, am I feeling like grounded and calm and clear while I'm, like watching a kid's
Or am
movie?
I actually in the back of my mind still
Or am I
going?
like trying to numb and avoid, or like, it
Yeah.
could be so many things. And sometimes, and it's not black or white, right? Like I think we talked before about like this metaphor of like the self being the sun, and there might be kind of like these clouds that are kind of passing by, or like bit over, but you might also still feel connected to like kind of that deeper, truer self at the same time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is that the reality is that if a catastrophic event is going to happen, it's going to happen, right? You can prepare by either evacuating, leaving, or doing the best you can if you're in a zone safe enough. But by giving yourself a break, I guess, or like I'll just use my case as an example. I know I can go back when the news show up again and say, okay, this is going to happen. So let me go back one time when an update is due versus watching it the whole time. Right. So that would be more of a grounded, rational decision.
Yeah. And sometimes too, like it's not like the role is to get rid of parts in IFS, right? It's actually to like unburden them and help them to kind of live harmoniously with one another and kind of lead more from self. So there might be moments where you're intentionally like, okay, this part is really good at preparing for disaster and really enjoys doing that, and I'm going to support that part in doing that, right? Like showing up emotionally like with compassion while you're also kind of with this part that is preparing, for example. That can be a lot more peaceful. And I think when you think about trauma and like when we tend to develop trauma symptoms, there's this often like this inability to really be present in the moment and kind of processing what's happening as it's going on. And with IFS, you're able to be more rooted in yourself so that you can be present in the moment and not kind of get stuck in dissociation or panicking or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, part of trauma is at the individual level, but also at the community level. And what I'm hearing is internal parts can actually keep that open communication, just as you can keep communication with the community, whether it's your community outside in the same city, or I'm thinking also family members within certain boundaries. You can also have boundaries for that. So that's part of like having compassion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when it's something that's really interesting is when you're able to kind of be in this place where you're more centered in yourself, that tends to draw that out in other people. It's like when we're in a place that's grounded and centered and calm, call it mirror neurons or whatever, right? But it does help other people to feel more grounded in your presence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know today we are kind of limited with our time, so I want to kind of shift a little bit with community or like family member. One thing that I'm noticing right now, I actually have friends that have posted um, on like Facebook a really actually kind of gentle and kind message to the community outside that says, you know, not everybody can evacuate. Actually, the airports were shut down. You couldn't leave by plane. Gas was like running out. So not everyone can actually evacuate. And we understand people outside worry and get really anxious. But sometimes that anxiety kind of increases the stress of the people that are in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I know with IFS, by acknowledging your own parts and acknowledging that other people may have their different parts, you know, that will kind of spiral sometimes, that actually increases the stress. And I'm curious, I mean, I can speak from my own language, but I want to know how IFS could see that, how IFS would manage that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really beautiful question. I think that when you're in a place where you're feeling more rooted in yourself, you're able to
Mm-hmm.
see like when someone's coming from like a protective part or, you know, whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
in a part, you can see clearly like, okay, this is what's happening for that person and have compassion for them without having to
Mm-hmm.
internalize that. So, you know, we talk about like actual boundaries, right? But there's also
Mm-hmm.
psychological boundaries where we're not absorbing or taking on kind of
Mm-hmm.
other people's emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we are not able to see it, we may actually take that on ourselves. That's what you're
Mhm.
saying. And we
Yeah.
may all have those moments where, you know, maybe we're not in a very high self moment
Yeah.
and then we miss it, right? And then, and that's the part that you're saying is have compassion for ourselves. But we may be in a higher self moment and be able to see, oh, that person is just really worried and their anxious part is really, or their protectors are, you know, or managers are trying to do something. Um, so if we can see that, then we can actually establish our own boundaries
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that we don't take that stress while we're also at the same time going through a very traumatic, stressful experience.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think that like you can have kind of these internal boundaries and you can have external boundaries. And I think what
Mm-hmm.
you said too about like putting it out there in social media, right? Like letting the people that you love know, like, this is what's happening for me. And also, like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't take on your stress. Like, I need to know what's going on for myself right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Situation.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I know personally I've had to set my own boundaries with my mom, who is highly stressful. You know, she's so stressed right now. So my boundaries with her is I can't hear her voice messages
Yeah.
because I know she's stressed. And what I do is I do message and I respond written messages. I send pictures. I video record kids. You know, the house, everything is good. We're fine. Those are my boundaries. Because you know I know that her stress is valid. She is worried about us, and it makes sense. Um, but there is a part of me probably in this moment that is saying you can't take that on, because if you take that on, how are you going to be centered to manage? We don't know how strong the winds are going to be tonight.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
The
Definitely.
reality, right? That reality that you know, if we don't really know the unpredictability of a natural disaster.
Yeah. And you can have compassion for it. Must be really hard
Mm-hmm.
as a parent
Mm-hmm.
to watch your kid in that situation and also have compassion for your own parts that are just trying to like manage the situation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
show up gracefully as also a parent and like
Mm-hmm.
sent is like, okay, we're okay and this is okay and I'm not going to panic so that you're not panicking, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of IFS, right? That it really allows you to acknowledge all of these different parts as they come, and you said it really nicely in the moment,
Yeah.
right? We have to be present or try our best to be present because they may show up, and just have compassion for the different parts. And when it comes to our family and community, also, you know, have compassion for them.
Yeah.
But that only happens if we're a bit more centered ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And you can be boundaried and compassionate. Like it's not,
Mm-hmm.
like
It's not
there might be
exclusive.
parts that feel like boundaries are not kind or that you should, whatever, like tend to that relationship. But I think a lot of the time, like boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me at the same time. I don't remember who said that quote.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to like need to do that, to have boundaries to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Any other? I'm trying to look at. I'm not quite sure what all IFS would say about natural disasters. Any other thoughts about it?
Well, I mean, I think kind of I think I maybe mentioned parts mapping before, but even
Mm-hmm.
just like
Yes.
sitting down and really like
Mm-hmm.
writing out like what are the
Mm-hmm.
feelings or thoughts or emotions that are coming up
Mm-hmm.
can be really grounding. Like that's a practical
Mm-hmm.
that can help you kind of get back into a place of,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I can see all that's happening
Mm-hmm.
internally, and I'm more in a place where I'm able to like be in my higher self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just being a lot more mindful, I guess, in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and clearly as best as we can, because I know everybody has actually different situations. Some people are, and that's the thing that we cannot. I like what you said. That what you said is we don't want to get rid of the parts. We just want to have compassion towards them because there are people that actually evacuate. There are people whose home are like very high risk. We don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be devastating. So those are people that actually are in the very just high risk situations.
Yeah.
And their parts, will look different than my parts. And it's okay to have them as long as we are just kind to them and
Yeah.
have compassion towards them. Because I don't want to minimize, or I don't want it to sound like we're minimizing the reality of natural disasters. They are devastating. People lose lives. They lose their homes. You know.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And I think that the oftentimes like we actually do need our parts, right? Like
mm-hmm,
to have a part that's able to manage and figure out like
mm-hmm,
how to handle a situation in the moment, like that is important. And it doesn't mean that
yeah.
you can't emotionally like hold space and compassion for that part as it's kind of going into crisis mode,
Mm-hmm,
managing the situation, for example. But
right.
we're not trying to get rid of parts. We're just trying to like help
Mm-hmm,
them feel unburdened, like they don't have to take
mm-hmm,
this role, they're empowered in this role, and also that
mm-hmm,
they have choice in how they want to show up and can.
right. Because anxiety can serve a role, right? If I'm anxious and afraid, maybe there is a good reason why anxiety is taking charge right now. Maybe fear is a good thing to feel right now because it's gonna put me in a safe place, my family and I. Maybe it's going to, help me actually put the shutters and actually know that if I live in an RV, I have to leave,
Yeah,
is they have a function. I'm
yeah,
not speaking IFS language.
yeah. Well, no, I mean, you're right though, they do, they have a
They do
role.
have a function.
Every part has strengths. It's like if a part is unburdened, they might not choose
Mm-hmm,
the role that they kind of took on out of a sense of urgency and need, but they might,
mm-hmm,
or they might really like to manage, like
mm-hmm,
what needs to get done and a to-do list, but they might feel really
mm-hmm,
burdened by like the anxiety and the weight or the
mm-hmm,
person that they kind of had accompanied with that. So I think it allows IFS can really allow parts to like show up with their strengths without feeling like weighed down by kind of the
mm-hmm,
heaviness of feeling like they have to save you in the moment, or they have to like
mm-hmm,
take on the whole emotional weight of the situation. And also I think one of the other things that's really beautiful is like it helps parts to have more harmony between them. There might be parts that have completely polar opposite views on how to best manage
mm-hmm.
a situation that might be really like feel really conflicted and painful internally, and
Yeah.
being able to kind of have peace between those parts that can see like, okay, I get that you're, for example, like to use the example of like setting a boundary with a family member, there might be a part that's like, what are they going to think? Are they going to be upset with me or whatever? Right. Like
Mm-hmm.
really worried about the impact on the relationship, and that there might be another part that's like, okay, I have to set this boundary, or here's all of the ways that they've crossed my boundaries in the past that show me I need to have this boundary in place, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of can help both of those parts to like understand and have compassion for one another. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this would be a good place to pause. Wishing everyone out there, to be, stay safe, and hopefully we don't really come across on the other side with so much damage, because I know it's going to happen just because of the nature of what it is. But really just thinking about, everyone out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I hope everybody is
Hmm.
okay. Everybody has the resources that they need to get through this
Yeah.
peacefully.
Hmm.
And again, I think if there's anything in particular people have questions about or want
Hmm.
help or guidance about, they please feel free to drop questions or comments
Yeah.
in
Yeah, for sure.
the comments below, or
Yeah. And we'll be happy
yeah.
to check those.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you like what you hear, you can subscribe or hit the bell to get notified
Yeah.
when another episode comes out.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.